Welcome back to the briefing. There are two numbers that define why global oil markets are pricing in supply catastrophe and why the United States is conducting the most intensive bombing campaign since the Second World War. And the gap between them is not a tactical detail. It is the geographic reality that makes this crisis unsolvable through military force alone. Number one, 21. That is the width in nautical miles of the Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point, the choke point where approximately 1/5 of global petroleum supply transits every single day. Number two, 5,500. That is the number of targets the United States destroyed inside Iran in just 10 days of Operation Epic Fury, the heaviest bombardment occurring on March 10th. Let that sink in. America can destroy 5,500 military targets, eliminate 60 major warships, wipe out 16 mine-laying vessels, and reduce Iran's conventional naval capacity to zero, and still cannot guarantee safe passage through a 21 nautical mile wide waterway, because the adversary has shifted from conventional warfare to asymmetric chaos. Stay with me, because this is not about who has more firepower or better technology. This is about what happens when a regime facing existential defeat decides that if it cannot control the strait, no one will. After the United States systematically destroyed Iran's surface fleet, including all 4 Suleimani-class warships, the Jamaran-class vessel docked at Chabahar, the Bandor-class ships, and effectively eliminated Iran's ability to conduct conventional naval operations, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps did not surrender the waterway. It declared the strait closed and began implementing an asymmetric strategy designed to make commercial transit so dangerous that ship captains refuse to attempt passage regardless of what military escorts are available. 3 vessels have already been struck. A Thai-flagged bulk carrier is burning. A Japanese container ship sustained damage. A Marshall Islands-flagged bulk tanker was hit. And hundreds of commercial vessels are now anchored outside the strait, refusing to transit, carrying an estimated $15 billion worth of petroleum that cannot reach markets. The weapon system Iran is deploying does not require sophisticated naval platforms or advanced guidance technology. It requires small, cheap, expendable assets that can be launched from concealed positions along the Iranian coastline and operated by crews that understand they are participating in suicide missions. Kamikaze speedboats equipped with explosives and simple navigation systems that cost tens of thousands of dollars to build, but require million-dollar missiles to intercept. Remote-controlled explosive-laden vessels that can be guided from shore stations using commercial satellite communications, and basic remote control technology available in hobbyist markets. Shahed drones modified to carry anti-ship warheads, flying low over water to evade radar detection until they are within terminal attack range. Sea mines that can be deployed from small fishing boats or commercial vessels operating at night, using simple depth and pressure triggers that activate when specific vessel signatures pass overhead. The entire Iranian strategy is built on the recognition that defending against this threat requires resources that scale exponentially with the number of attacks, while the cost to Iran of mounting attacks remains relatively constant and low. Each interceptor missile costs more than the target it destroys. Each patrol aircraft burns fuel and requires maintenance hours that accumulate faster than procurement can replace them. Each defensive position requires personnel who must maintain vigilance continuously, while attacks can be launched sporadically from positions that change between operations. America can provide military escorts for commercial vessels, but escorting every ship through a 21-mile choke point where attacks can come from multiple vectors simultaneously is not a sustainable security model. It is a resource trap, where the defender must maintain constant vigilance and perfect interception, while the attacker only needs occasional success to make the entire route uninsurable. And insurance is the key variable that military force cannot solve. Commercial shipping operates on razor-thin margins where insurance premiums are factored into every voyage calculation. When underwriters determine that transit through Hormuz carries unacceptable risk, premiums do not just increase, they become prohibitive or unavailable entirely. And when insurance is unavailable, shipping companies do not heroically attempt passage anyway. They anchor their vessels and wait for conditions to change, which is exactly what is happening right now. The ships waiting outside the strait are not there because they lack military escort options. They are there because their operators have made economic calculations that the cost of attempting transit exceeds the cost of delay. And every day those ships remain anchored. The oil they carry does not reach refineries, does not get processed into gasoline and diesel, and does not enter supply chains that depend on predictable deliveries. President Trump issued an ultimatum that if mines are not cleared from the strait, Iran will face military consequences at a level never seen before. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and CENTCOM Commander Admiral Cooper have stated that strikes will intensify 20 times harder using F-22, F-35, B-1, and B-52 bombers in continuous rotation. The planned military response includes a Blue Dome air defense shield equipped with laser and microwave weapons to intercept drones and an underwater network of Lockheed Lamprey autonomous submarine drones designed to detect and eliminate mines and small submersible threats. This is not empty rhetoric. The United States has the technical capability to implement every element of this response. But technical capability and strategic effectiveness are not the same thing. Iran can lay mines faster than the United States can clear them. Iran can launch drones faster than defensive systems can intercept them. And Iran can sacrifice personnel and assets at a rate that American political systems cannot sustain, because the asymmetry and casualty tolerance is profound. Here is what Operation Epic Fury has actually accomplished. In 10 days, 5,500 targets destroyed, 60 major warships eliminated, 16 mine-laying vessels taken out in surgical strikes. Iran's conventional naval capacity reduced to combat ineffective status. Iran's ability to conduct traditional military operations against American or Allied forces has been degraded to near zero. And yet, commercial shipping through the Strait has not resumed. Oil prices continue climbing. Ships remain anchored. The Strait remains effectively closed because the targets that were destroyed were the visible, conventional elements of Iranian military power. What remains are the asymmetric elements that operate from concealed positions, use expendable platforms, and do not require the kind of infrastructure that can be targeted from the air. And there is another element that makes this strategically complex in ways that pure military metrics cannot capture. Behind closed doors, CENTCOM is not just responding to immediate threats. CENTCOM is using this crisis as an opportunity to permanently eliminate Iran's future power projection capability. The target list includes not just active military sites, but industrial facilities that manufacture ballistic missiles, underground bunkers where future weapons could be developed, and infrastructure that would allow Iran to rebuild offensive capacity after the current conflict ends. This is not about securing the Strait. This is about regime decapitation and permanent strategic degradation disguised as a security operation. And Iranian leadership understands this, which is why they are fighting not to win, but to make the cost of American victory unacceptable. The Iranian response has been to deliberately position military command centers in hospitals and schools, a tactic designed to ensure that American strikes produce civilian casualties that can be weaponized in international media and used to generate pressure for ceasefire. This is not a defensive measure to protect military assets. This is an offensive information operation, where civilian deaths serve the strategic purpose of creating conditions for intervention by international actors, who might pressure the United States to halt operations before Iran's military capacity is fully destroyed. And it is working to the extent that each civilian casualty report creates political costs that accumulate over time and constrain military options, even when those options would be tactically effective. Iran's president has framed this as a survival war against Zionist American imperialism. The new supreme leader has declared that Iran will not bow and will achieve victory through faith. IRGC commanders have publicly threatened to fire on any ship attempting straight transit. This is not negotiating language. This is the rhetoric of a regime that has decided it will fight until it loses the capacity to fight, rather than accept terms that would guarantee its long-term strategic irrelevance. And from Iran's perspective, that calculation makes sense. Accepting a ceasefire now means accepting permanent strategic defeat. The nuclear program is destroyed. The conventional navy is eliminated. The industrial capacity to rebuild is being systematically targeted. What Iran retains is the ability to make the Strait unusable, and that is the only leverage the regime has left. Israel is providing active support to American operations, intercepting Iranian drones before they reach targets and conducting strikes on drone production facilities. Houthi forces in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon are expected to escalate attacks as part of the broader asymmetric campaign. The conflict is not contained to the Strait. It is a regional operation where multiple actors are engaged in coordinated or semi-coordinated actions designed to stretch American defensive capabilities across multiple theaters simultaneously. Now, consider the worst-case trajectory that current conditions are moving toward. Iran's strategy of deploying kamikaze speedboats, remote-controlled explosive vessels, and Shahed drones to mine and attack shipping has already paralyzed commercial traffic. Insurance premiums have reached levels that make transit economically prohibitive. The $15 billion worth of oil currently stuck on anchored ships is not a temporary disruption. It is the beginning of a supply crisis that will cascade through global energy markets with effects that compound over time. Every day the Strait remains closed, inventories deplete, prices climb, and the political pressure on governments to intervene increases. The American military response is moving toward carpet bombing of Iranian coastal areas and mountain positions where IRGC drone launch sites are concealed. B-52 bombers conducting saturation strikes on areas that cannot be precisely targeted because the facilities are deliberately hidden among civilian infrastructure. This is not precision warfare. This is area denial through overwhelming firepower. and it produces the kind of destruction that creates long-term instability regardless of whether it achieves immediate tactical objectives. And there is a breaking point that military planners are tracking but cannot publicly discuss. High-ranking IRGC commanders are being systematically targeted and eliminated. Mid-level officers are under pressure that creates conditions for defection or breakdown. If the command structure fractures, if key figures decide that continued resistance guarantees their personal elimination, then the regime could collapse internally faster than external military pressure alone would achieve. But regime collapse is not the same as conflict resolution. A collapsing regime with access to ballistic missiles, asymmetric weapons, and proxy networks across the region does not peacefully transition. It enters a final phase where commanders with nothing left to lose unleash remaining capabilities against any available target. Gulf neighbors, civilian infrastructure, American bases, Israeli cities. The scenario where a cornered Iranian regime decides to inflict maximum damage in its final weeks is not hypothetical. It is the logical endpoint of a strategy that trades long-term survival for short-term leverage. The United States has frozen $2.5 billion in Iranian overseas bank assets. That is a diplomatic and economic tool, not a military one. But it reveals the multi-domain nature of the pressure being applied. Financial isolation, military degradation, information warfare, alliance coordination with Israel and Gulf states, sanctions on remaining oil exports. The campaign is designed to create conditions where Iran cannot sustain military operations, cannot access resources, cannot rebuild capacity, and faces internal pressure from a population that sees no benefit from continued resistance. But here's the variable that does not appear in military briefings or economic sanctions packages. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide. That geography does not change regardless of how many targets are destroyed or how many assets are deployed. As long as Iran retains the capability to launch cheap asymmetric attacks from concealed positions along hundreds of miles of coastline, the strait remains a contested space where commercial shipping cannot operate with acceptable risk. And as long as commercial shipping cannot operate, the global economy pays a price that accumulates daily and creates pressure for resolution through means other than military victory. What happens when the world's most powerful military destroys 5,500 targets in 10 days, eliminates an entire navy, and still cannot guarantee safe passage through a 21-mile waterway? What happens when insurance premiums make commercial transit impossible even with military escorts? What happens when a regime facing certain defeat decides that making the strait unusable is its only remaining leverage? What happens when carpet bombing becomes the only option left to clear coastal launch sites hidden among civilian areas? The answer is not in the number of targets destroyed or the sophistication of defensive systems being deployed. The answer is in the recognition that some geographic realities cannot be solved through military superiority alone, and some adversaries will choose mutual destruction over acceptance of terms that guarantee strategic irrelevance. And right now, $15 billion worth of oil sits on ships that refuse to move, while two forces with incompatible objectives continue fighting toward an endpoint neither can define.